Hey, Lauren, how are you?
Very good, thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Awesome. Um, Let me go ahead and pin this. But thank you so much for joining today. How are you?
I am
Oh,
good.
wow.
Thank you.
Hold on. Something's going awry here with my software. Uh, but yeah, what's up? How's your week going?
Week is going very well, thank you. Yeah, lots of exciting stuff happening in crypto, and it's also, yeah, it's just been a nice time in terms of like looking at deal flow, working with portfolio companies.
Yeah, of course. Well, I appreciate you being on today. Thank you so much for joining and giving us 30 minutes of your day on this beautiful Thursday. Um, but yeah, would love to. I gave everyone a little bit of background, but partner Pantera Capital have been in the space, investing in all kinds of stuff for a while. But would love to, quick intro from you, so chat can know who you are.
Yeah, of course. So my background is in software engineering. I used to be a developer on a trading platform, then worked in trading after that at at Bank of America. I was doing interest rate options, and that was ultimately what led me to crypto. In 2016, I just discovered smart contracts
Mm-hmm.
after basically working at uh, a couple jobs that allowed me to see the entire trade life cycle. And so I always approached crypto with more of a DeFi mindset. Like I was interested in what smart contracts could do for finance
Mm-hmm.
specifically. But since I've joined Pantera, we're a generalist fund. So I've invested across the space, both into tokens and equity companies that support the crypto space.
Gotcha. Wow, that's 2016. OG, OG in the lifetime of
It
crypto.
felt like I was not early when I joined. There were so many people who were there before me, but I think it's still early.
Mm-hmm.
So like, yeah, it's for anybody who's coming into the space new. I think in 4 years you'll probably feel the same way that you know.
Yeah, it moves fast. Yeah. Yeah,
Exactly.
I see it posted all the time, right? Like if you look at the actual number of like active wallets and you look at like the population on the earth, like it is still drastically low, right? Like very,
So true.
very low. Um, but yeah, no, yeah, we appreciate you coming on today. The general theme that we've kind of been talking through, well, actually on the stream today, we've been all over the place. We were play testing NFT worlds. We were just talking about very conceptually what Web3 is with Mickey from Dapper. But in this, I would love to kind of like pick your brain, right, and talk about, what you're in a very unique position, right? And I was telling chat this before, but being in venture capital is great because you can kind of see general trends of where the market's going before it goes that way. But it's also scary because you don't know if that is the right way that everything would be going. Um, so you live in this kind of um, I don't know, I want to say like mystic state, but constantly this like trying to envision what's coming in the next 3 to 5 years. But where you sit today, and some of the trends that you've maybe seen over the past like year, or what's coming up. Obviously, we're with cryptos now. Like, is there anything that's like surprised you, or like any trends that you've seen and been like, huh, I didn't think it was going to go that way.
Definitely. I think what's interesting about crypto is it definitely themes definitely come in waves. So when I first joined my fund in early 2018, I think the hot thing at the time were stable coins.
Sure.
And then from there, we moved to DEXs and then saw different themes emerge from that over time. And so every cycle, or every different wave, I think brings something new and exciting and in some ways like is a little bit unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest surprise was the run up in NFTs and like the interest that we saw from the consumer front and how much that really brought in more people from like quote unquote the mainstream into the crypto space.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I personally would never have predicted that. But it was really exciting to see and to be able to support that with the investments that we've made.
Yeah. No, that's a good point, right? And that's The other thing that I was wanting to like tie this back to, right, is that from so first of all, one, I agreed. No, I never in my life saw what was gonna get hit with the NFT train, which is amazing, and hats off to NBA Top Shot and Dapper and all them that made that happen. But it's now that that's happened, right, and where the market is now, the businesses are like, this is real, right? Like we should be paying attention to it, and what that and what comes with that is them trying to guess what the trends are, right? To offer it before the next one does. I think that, I don't want to say that doing something, basically trying to do last season's fashion, like, just doesn't work. It doesn't work in clothes. It doesn't work so much as well in tech. But if you were looking at, the stuff coming across your desk today, and trends that you see moving in the future, or something that is like maybe early indicator being like, this is something to like pay attention to, like is there anything out there that you would want to share?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a number of ways that we and probably many other funds try to get ahead of trends in the crypto space. And so I'd say the cool thing about crypto is that you've got essentially a public ledger that you can be pulling data from in real time. So like, unlike a public company that is providing reports on a quarterly basis, you get
Mm-hmm.
real-time data about like what's going on at any given time with a protocol. And so you can kind of see the early markings of like upticks in users or upticks in wallets created on a certain network or upticks in transaction volume. And so that's how we try to stay a little bit ahead of the trends. You can kind of track that data through a dashboard and just be monitoring it constantly.
Right, so when you're saying that, I mean, so are you taking those indicators, right, and saying that we're seeing an uptick of transactions on, X chain, and therefore, we believe that, what I'm like trying to formulate, I guess, is like, beyond like the idea of like trading crypto itself, like, can you draw indicators from a chain data to like a business or area that would be on top of it, right?
Yeah.
See what I'm
So
saying?
you don't, I mean, you also don't even need like a live and trading token to be able to track how a decentralized business might be going. Essentially, if you built a protocol or a decentralized application, it's a series of smart contracts
Mm-hmm.
um, that interacts with the blockchain, and that's what you can pull
Right.
data from. You can like analyze interactions with the smart contract, and that is what gives you the insights of like how much this decentralized application is being used.
Mm-hmm.
And so generally VCs would look for trends that indicate increase in some of these metrics over time before the hockey stick growth that we're all interested in seeing.
Gotcha. That's Yeah. I'm still like struggling to like, I'm still trying to figure out, is that like, if I'm looking at, so I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of Corey. I would probably be a S corp or C corp by the time I'm massive. Um, the Corey brand has somehow been successful over the next years, right? And I'm looking down the road. I'm telling my company, I'm like, hey, look, we're needing to make bets in Web3. We want to start creating new product offerings for our customers. How would you advise them, or if you were talking to like a Pepsi, right, or like a Coca-Cola, or a big historic brand, and they came to you and said, hey, we want to invest, or we want to get into Web3 in some way. Like, what advice would you give them, or what would you tell them to like pay attention to when doing that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's lots of tools that enterprises can use to be able to track on-chain data.
Mm-hmm.
And things that I think might be interesting would be um, user volume for, or like transaction volume for maybe comparable NFTs that they might want to create or digital goods that they might want to sell.
Mm-hmm.
Just thinking about what product they might want to, create, and looking for comparables in the crypto space that they can track with like the public on-chain data.
Got it.
So there's interesting tools being built, like Definitive. I think 3MR is another one that allow people to track wallets and like what if you're trying to build a specific product, like what users or wallets might be the best customers for you.
Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Ah, okay. So like, so from a company perspective, you actually have a lot of insight into um, competitor data, right? Like, because I think as of right now, if you were Pepsi and you were trying to figure out how many cans of Coke sold, that's not necessarily like public knowledge, right? And you can't see who's buying all that Coke. But now what you're saying is that a tactic that you can use is actually look at on-chain data to see maybe what not necessarily competitor projects or competitor things, but maybe what similar ones are doing, right? And see what their traffic and volume is and look at the tactics that they're using to drive awareness, engagement, community, yada, 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 you name them all. But use that as an instrument, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
There's a number of tools that are being built like that are, I would say, kind of like a mixed panel or App Annie version, but for the Web3 space.
Gotcha. I've never thought about that. Always learn something new on these. I love that. But like even outside of that, I mean, so what are you seeing? Like, I feel like whenever there's any emerging tech space, like there's this like gobble up period where you get the big companies are like, oh my gosh, this makes sense, and then they start buying all of this, the little startups up that are out there. But that I feel like that is somewhat is antithesis the word, but it like philosophically kind of goes against, I think, some of what Web3 was all founded on, which was kind of like, screw big business. Like, we're here to operate in freedom. We don't want any of this. So, I mean, are you seeing like a lot of these startups being like, we were against it, but damn, cash is awesome. So like, we'll start, and basically big companies looking to start going on these buying sprees.
Yeah, I mean, I think in crypto, there's like various colors of decentralization, and I think it means something different to everybody. I mean, from like the very earliest core of crypto, yes, there are a lot of people who were anti-large business, wanted to basically cut out middleman and transact peer-to-peer, and regulation free essentially.
Right.
But I think there's lots of flavors of this. It's evolved over time. I don't think that's applicable to every use case that we're seeing in crypto.
Right.
And I mean, I think like generally what quote unquote the Web3 portion of crypto unlocks is like the idea of like an ownership economy, or having your consumers be more involved with what you're building. And so, I think it's a different flavor of decentralization, sure. And maybe it's not like in line with the core thesis of Bitcoin specifically, but
right.
I think, yes, we're seeing people kind of being either selling themselves to larger entities or working with larger corporations to accomplish their business goals.
Got it. Yeah, that's it's always that weird part. So, I've got involved in the space early-ish on as well. And I just remember back in the day, it was like the Rue and the Ra of like, screw the man, we're here to like not do it. And now you like see, all these brands getting into it, which, I mean, honestly, it is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Not here to bash on any of that. But it is always this like, I feel like interesting thought perspective or like thought exercise to look at how you take like a very philosophical movement and it get mainstreamed, right? And that, I think it's happened over and over. Everything from like, punk rock, to like rap and stuff was all very, culture specific, and then it got mainstreamed, and then it goes through this whole kind of weird morphosis point of view. But again, with your like, why I find it fascinating with where you sit in the space, because again, you do get the micro and the macro view. You get to see what's coming in, what's going out. And so when you're looking at, areas that you see growth, all right, or maybe, and I don't know if like gross the word, but like, I feel like within every movement from a VC, and I'm not a venture capitalist, so can't speak from zero experience, right? But like you've got to see like spikes in, oh my gosh, we've had a ton of NFT marketplace startups come through, or we've had a bunch of custodial wallet ideas, people pitching to us left and right. I mean, you've got to see some like trend stuff. So is there anything that's been recent that's been coming around where you're like, oh wow, we've had a bunch of XYZ because ABC, I don't know.
Yeah, no, like I said, things come in waves. So I will say like the latest wave of pitches that I've been seeing that are like very similar to each other are the data analytics companies. I think that's very hot right now. A lot of people are coming into this space and thinking about how can we make the data easier to access for people.
Right.
Because yes, the data exists publicly on chain, but to be able to access it, it's a really frustrating process. It's not standardized data. And so there's a lot of companies that are indexing the data, just making it easier to view, both for maybe traders, for businesses who want to monitor their protocol and see how things are doing, and for regulators who want to see what's going on in the crypto space and be monitoring things from that perspective. So I would say I'm seeing a lot of pitches around data right now.
Yeah, and that's the big one that I think is super compelling, and there's not a lot out there. But I mean, but again, like we're talking like top of funnel, right? So to say that there's not anything out there, but there's a bunch of pitches means that there's probably already some companies that are building in a direction going that way. So if we start to think like, so if you had any futurist ideas of like what the next wave would be, like, are you seeing any gaps in the market where you're like, damn, like this would really fit compared to everything else that's out there? I mean, is there anything that you would want to share that, might not be your next $1 million business idea?
I mean, there's nothing specifically I can like point to that's like, at the most granular level, but the things that I'm looking for right now, especially in the bear market, are infrastructure tools. So I do like the idea of data tools that help founders build their protocol into a real business. I do like the idea of dev tools, things that help the founders and engineers of these protocols build in the crypto space a bit more easily across all the layer ones. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm looking for that I think is going to be pretty big, in the next cycle.
And like, so from that perspective, right? Like, if you were like, because again, I'm trying to tie this back because the theme today is around like how big businesses or companies or IPs should be looking, and when it comes to investing, or like at least having a perspective on where the market is going, and then how do they make strategic bets against that. I think that there's been a few interesting things that you said. I mean, one obviously is that having an IT department from a company build or invest in software that allows them to analyze on-chain data to have a better insight into competitive advantage is like a pretty interesting one. Looking at the infrastructure side, I think, is another. But if you had to like advise a company on, you want to invest, right? You want to get your feet wet in Web3. We're in a bear market, but here's some areas that you should think about, or even like look at potentially moving capital to. Like what would some of those be?
Yeah, I mean, I think it heavily depends on the industry that an enterprise might be operating in. But generally, I think the easiest things to invest into and like the most understandable use cases, or not use cases, but the most understandable investments. And I think the ones that grow pretty big over time are the picks and shovels investments. So if you are um, a company that sells consumer goods to retail, like maybe you'd be interested in digital assets. Like, how can you bring more of your customers looking at your products online, or buying more things from you that are digital?
Mm-hmm.
Then investing into like an NFT infrastructure company might be interesting. If you are more of a financial institution, then there's lots of like DeFi, CeFi type bridges that you could invest into. I think it just depends on the industry that you're interested in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair too, because if you draw that line to like supply chain, right, or if you're in logistics or in this place or that one, like, investing in, or like even maybe providing stuff into that, I think is a great way to think about it. The other one too. So we were talking with Mickey before this from Dapper, and I was like digging for what's the next big idea, man, like give us some insight. And what his thought from a business perspective, like if they were to potentially invest, it's that like that idea of like building a platform that allows people to create and mod and kind of expand on their own, which is taking some of what is Web 2, in that you build the platform and then everyone generates all the content and value on top of it. But in Web 3, it's that potentially the next big jump in for a business would be to create the platform that you let everyone create on, but you don't own all of it like you typically would, right? Like you might own some pieces of it, but you don't own all of it. The community and the world owns the rest of it. I mean, what are your thoughts? Do you think something like that would work? Thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely think something like that could work. And I do think that's the way that things seem to be trending. I mean, people want to be more involved with the companies that they love. And I think we're seeing a lot of interest in businesses that cater to that. I mean, one interesting example we invested into a while ago is Brain Trust. And essentially, it's kind of like a decentralized TopTal or Upwork, where people can actually receive tokens, or like a form of the revenue from the labor that they're providing. And so it's just kind of, if you look at similar business models like an Uber or Lyft, like these companies are taking a big take rate from the people actually providing the labor. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
this is the kind of thing that these businesses can transform. It can make the people providing the labor just that much wealthier, that much more involved with the decisions, the strategic decisions that get made by the business.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And like, so I've looked at Brain Trust a lot. So, in some world, like they are like a competitor to what Gigster does, which is great. But I am very hopeful that that idea of, because I mean, they basically operate like a DAO, right? Which is like almost this DAO-ish model,
Mm-hmm.
which I do firmly think, and this could be like the other area that if I look at the future and like what the next big jump in for businesses are going to be, is that, I think hybrid DAOs are a thing, right? I think that is like, if you're going to operate a DAO, it has to be a hybrid DAO because you still have to have decision making quickly at some level.
Yeah.
But to see potentially, I think multiple things. One, like the huge jump in moment for a company would be like if, I don't know, like Accenture was like, we're going to operate as a hybrid DAO, like a portion of all of our consultants are just members. They get a governance token. They can vote on some stuff. I think that would be a huge shift, but and it ties back to, I'm curious what companies are building tooling to support that, right? Like, what's your stance on like DAOs in general?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think DAOs as they exist today, where it's like truly decentralized, just kind of a free for all, where there's a lot of people trying to make decisions, it's very hard to manage a large group.
Yeah.
So I agree. Like, I think this hybrid model of having a few people who are maybe elected to the top, or there's some other governance model that just makes decision making a little bit easier, but still represents the majority of like the larger group, is something that's more feasible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, totally. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out, and I'm assuming that there'll be some wave or something that hits like the NFT kind of thing, and 6 months later we're looking down the road and we're like, shit, that was definitely the play. But we won't know. But Lauren, thank you so much for stopping by today. We really, really do appreciate it. If you want to let anyone know like where to follow you, where to find you online, where would that be?
Yeah. So my handle pretty much across the board, Twitter, everything, is my first initial last name, Stephanian. And so that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for stopping by. This was a great conversation, and we'll be looking at. When I get off of here, I'm going to go look at for data analytics thing, because that is, from a competitive analysis standpoint, is pretty compelling.
Sounds good. Well, appreciate having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
All right, Lauren from Pantera.